Hey guys, Legacy here. Today, I'm just going to do a quick video on how to disassemble the D-Boys Scar. This will work for the D-Boys Echo 1 Classic Army and Classic Army Sportline Scar Ls. The Scar H's are very, very similar, but they are a little bit different. So this was the 2010 model. It really doesn't make a difference because D-Boys stopped making their Scar, but just in case you guys are wondering. The first step is to take a hex tool, a hex key, and it should be the 2.5 sized hex key, and unscrew the stock screw in the back. There's two screws on either side. It's the one closest to the stock. So there's one here, one on top under where your rear sight would be, and one on this side. Again, out of the three, it's the closest to the stock. I've already unscrewed those, saved some time, but they will look like this. They're three pretty small screws. And once you do that, you can take your stock off. And if you need to, you can flip the gun over and fold the stock in half in order to feed your wires through so that your wires don't get caught coming out. Now, I have Dean's and a detachable MOSFET wired on this gun. You might just have a standard Tamiya plug, but you still might need to feed them through. I don't know what you have. Once you feed them through, the stock with the bolt spring will come off, the mock bolt spring. Put this off to the side, you're done with that. Now that you have this part of the gun, there's a pin here and a pin here. You need to take out the pin in front, just a punch. Check them out the other side. With that out, the upper and lower receivers will separate. Now, flip the gun over if you need to, but actually the mock bolt right here and back, this is only attached by friction, so if you're not careful, it can fall out. It's very easy to put back in, so don't worry about it if it falls out, but just know that that might happen. Once you take the lower off, you will see you have your gearbox, your hop-up and barrel, and the mock bolt behind it. So put the lower receiver off to the side. This is your upper. Your upper consists of the upper receiver, the mock bolt, the detachable bolt handle, which can go on either side. To take this off, I won't be doing it because I don't need to, but again, it's a hex screw in there. You untwist it and you can put it on the other side if you want to. There's the mock bolt. Your barrel assembly's in here. It will be your barrel spring, stock hop-up, and it goes in a little slit here. You'll see, make sure the spring's on it. It should come back when you push it in. Nothing else is actually in here. Very simple gun. There's just the rails up here. Barrel extension comes with a gun. There's nothing else to it. You will have a front sight here, which is detachable, but you don't need to take it off if you don't want to. Putting the upper to the side, taking the lower back out. This is where things will get annoying and tricky for people opening their gun for the first time. The gearbox can be a pain in the ass to get out of the lower receiver until you get used to it. I'm not going to lie. Probably the one thing I don't like about this gun is how they designed it. I actually disabled the ambidextrous controls on my gun because it's so much easier to open it up without it. But if you still have the ambidextrous controls, I will touch that when I get to the gearbox. But for me, I only have this side now, so it's a lot easier to take apart. So here we go. Next step would be to take off the motor grip. You're going to need Phillips screwdriver for the one I have. I'm pretty sure the stock one is also a Phillips screwdriver. You unscrew the two screws at the bottom of the motor plate. There's one. There's another one on the other side. And then with this comes your motor. One, two, and then your motor inside here. I have a Franken torque in my gun. You might have a different one. My motor actually, I have one motor clip and one soldered joint to it. So I'm going to stop the video now, unsolder that, and get back to you. Alright, so now that you had the motor out, for you guys, it'll be in here. You're literally just going to slide it out with your hands after you unclip these motor connectors. I solder mine to the motor. That's why I had to go desolder it. So, next step is that inside the motor grip, there's 2 screws. One on this side and one on this side. They should be the opposite corners from each other. You're going to have to unscrew these. It's a Phillips head. They should come out fairly quickly, but they might not come all the way out. You might just kind of have to tell. Next is the other side. Once they're both out, your motor grip should slide off. Yep, see, mine aren't all the way out yet. There it goes. Alright, so now that your grip's off, just guide your wires through the grip. There's 2 holes on top of the grip where the wires go through. And your screws should come out. Here's one. The other one's still in there. Alright, now that you're left with the gearbox and the lower receiver. So you're still going to see there's 2 pins that are still in your gun. You're going to flip it over and punch those 2 pins out. Sometimes these pins are very, very stuck in the gun. It depends how many times you've taken your gun apart, really. Mine are pretty easy to take out now. Yours might not be. Now that your gun is down to this, you're going to realize that you have a loose gearbox and some more fire selectors. Now, my fire selectors are not ambidextrous anymore. I disabled the ambi feature, so this one works. This one moves, but it has no effect on the gun whatsoever. So my disassembly will be much easier than yours. However, for yours, you'll have to take a flathead screwdriver, put it in between the lower receiver and the gearbox, and then turn it up to pry. Now, if you can look in here, you'll be able to see that there's a gear underneath the what's it called? Fire selector. And there's a gear on the gearbox it attaches to. See how it's moving with the fire selector? You're going to look with your own eyes, because you probably can't see it in the video, but you have to pry this up as high as you can and detach the gears so they're not touching anymore. Then turn the selector away from the gears. After you do that, you go to the right side and you repeat. The right side is usually harder. For whatever reason, the left side. I've always found the left side to be harder. For me, it's easy because I'm used to this, so I'm going to take mine right out, but you might have to pry at that for a little while. Your goal is to detach this gear from the gear in the fire selector on the lower. Once the gear's out, this is your gearbox. First step is to take this piece out. So now you're going to remove that piece. Yours, once again, will have one on this side for the ambidextrous controls. I broke mine off. I literally just cut it off and disabled mine. You can do that too. It won't affect the gun at all. It'll just make it easier to take apart and put back together. Now you have your gearbox. So, going through the outside of the gearbox, you have cylinder, gearbox shell. This is part of the safety mechanism. Trigger, air nozzle. You can see your spring and spring guide in there. One of your bushings. Some more of your bushings. You got your screws. And then the rest is just the wires and what's on the inside. This is also your fire selecting plate, or your selector plate. Now, if you were to mod this to semi-auto only for, say, a DMR, you would have to cut into this to disable the full auto, but I'm not going to get into that this video because it's a very specific mod and really doesn't have anything to do with the gearbox in general. So to open the gearbox, you have to turn your gearbox over so the screws are facing up. If you are using your stock D-Boys gearbox shell, it will be Phillips head screws. So what you're going to do, you're just going to unscrew all of them. This might take a little while, so I don't know if I'm going to fast forward through this or not. But I'll try to make it as quick as I can. So as you can probably tell, my gearbox will look a little different than yours. My air nozzle is aftermarket. Everything in this gearbox is aftermarket, except for the shell. So the gearbox itself is the same as what it's in your Scar, but everything on the inside has been changed out. My spring is different. I have a Prometheus M135. My spring guide is different. I'm just naming the parts you can see visibly right now. I modified my trigger. My bushings, my cylinder, my air nozzle are all different. So yours will have a brass cylinder right here, a clear air nozzle right here, a steel spring back here, or a steel looking spring. It'll have like a gray finish on it. Your spring guide will be black, not silver looking. Your bushings will be a little darker, but very similar looking. Your gearbox won't be as scratched. Like I said, those scratches are from me trying to pry it open to detach the gears in the selector plate. I mean, from the fire selector. My bad. So now, once all your screws are out of the gearbox shell, you're going to need to take the easiest way to open a gearbox shell. I have another video actually on my channel about how to properly open your gearbox shell so that things don't go flying everywhere. I'll do it right now, but I explain it better in that video if you don't understand. So what you're going to do is take your... Hey guys, Legacy. This is going to be a reassembly of the D-Boy Scar L, including the gearbox. This gearbox probably for any version 2 gearbox, but it's already assembled minus 2 pieces, which I'm going to do for you right now. So just quickly going over things. This is the trigger, safety arm, contacts, tappet plate, sorry about that, sector, step or spur, and bevel gears. Over here is the anti-reversal latch, which goes right underneath the bevel gear. Spring guide, piston, cylinder head, air nozzle. And those are the main parts. Now you have little springs in here too, but basically the gears will go in the bushings, which go in the shell. So the bushings go in the shell, gears are placed in the bushings. The anti-reverse latch has a little post that goes in. You'll see that on the gearbox shell. Trigger with the trigger spring, a little post that goes in. Tappet plate connects to the air nozzle, and you slide the air nozzle over the cylinder head. There's a little nozzle in here that goes right on. Piston and piston head screw together, go into the cylinder, which is attached to the cylinder head. Spring and spring guide, you slide them right into the piston. And that's about it for the most part. So from here, now you need to attach the tappet plate spring to this post and put the spring guide into the gearbox. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. Now I have a modified tappet plate spring, and my pliers broke, so I'm going to punch. So I should get it. There we go. All you're doing is sliding it right over the post. It's pretty easy. Now that you have your gearbox all together and set up, you're on your last step, which is putting the spring and spring guide into the gearbox. So when I'm a righty, how I like to do it is turning the gearbox upside down. So the back part and the top is facing me like this. Now, what I do is I take either pliers or a punch or a pin, and I put it into the back end, the hole, in the spring guide. So this is going to go in the hole, and my thumb is going to go on top here. Now I take my hand and spread it out and put it on top of the rest of the gearbox to keep everything in place, because if you do not do this, the cylinder will want to pop out of place. So now that you have this, you're going to push this into the gearbox and then drop it so that the tabs line up. Now you're going to take your index finger, hold down the spring guide, then swap it to your middle finger, and take your index finger and hold down the cylinder as you take your other hand off. Check your hand for shims Make sure nothing came off, and you're good to go. Now I switch to my left hand. Then I pick up the top of the gearbox shell, put my middle finger and my thumb through the spring guide and cylinder holes, gently lower this directly on top. Then I use my thumb and my middle finger in my right hand to hold down the cylinder and spring guide as this lowers onto the gearbox shell. You should hear a click and everything's in place. To double check, you're going to pull your trigger. Make sure you can pull the trigger. Move your tappet plate and air nozzle back. That should move freely. Check to make sure your gear axles are in all the bushings and your anti-reversal latch is in its spot. Then finally, check to make sure, two last things, the cylinder is in the corners. It should fit flush in these corners. It should not be overlapping. And the back part should be a closed crease. There shouldn't be space near the spring guide. So now that your gearbox is back together, you're going to hold it in place while you screw it in. This is a tedious, I might fast forward this, but this is standard for version 2. I know version 3s will have screws in the bottom, and some have screws on top, some have the plate on top, but for the most part this is kind of what you do next. Now these screws on top, sometimes they have washers on them, sometimes they don't. Mine do, so you want to make sure you put those in as well. Now this gearbox, obviously, if you haven't noticed already, is not stock in any way, shape, or form for a D-Boy Scar. Just so you don't get your hopes up in what you're getting, or that you don't get confused as to why your D-Boy Scar doesn't look like this one. The shell is the same, the trigger is the same, and the contact box. A lot of people call that differently. The contacts, trigger housing, whatever you want to call it. Those are the stock D-Boys still. Other than that, every other spring or piece in here has been swapped out for an aftermarket part. So don't get discouraged if this does not look like your gearbox. Your gearbox should have this same black shell with clear air nozzle, brass cylinder with a port. It'll have a different spring and spring guide. It'll have a black plastic spring guide with bearings. It'll have a regular gray, silver color spring. It'll have gray color metal bushings. And the same trigger without the modifications on the side. You're going to want to screw each screw in almost completely tight around the gearbox, not all the way down. And then once they're all in, you're going to go back and tighten them down. Hey guys, so once you have your gearbox assembled and screwed in place, again, you're just going to double check, make sure it's working. You're going to push the air nozzle in. It should spring back at you. You're going to look to make sure that your spring guide is somewhat centered. You'll have a screw that goes in the back for M4s. For the Scar, you actually don't. That's why you want to make sure it's somewhat centered. It won't be perfect, but it should be roughly the same. These bushings should all have axles in them with the anti-reversal latch on both sides. So you can see that. Now the selector plate, if you push it forward, that should be safety. Your trigger should be stopped. If it's in the middle, it should be semi-auto. Back is full auto. So just basically make sure that your trigger stops when it's pushed forward. This is your basic check to make sure everything's in order once it's screwed down. Now, from here, for the Scar, you need to put your selector gear into the hole and kind of line it up with your selector plate while moving it around. Eventually, it'll kind of hit down into place. There you go. It'll click down into place, and that's what moves it from safe semi to auto. So, if you were to disable full auto for this gun, for example, if you want to make a DMR, this way is safety, down is semi, and back is full auto. So you would cut off this fin right here to prevent it moving back when it's moving to full auto. It would stay in semi-auto actually. And you can put epoxy back here too, or JB weld or plastic or anything to kind of just stop it from moving back into full auto. but that's what you would do. So now moving on, once this is in, you're going to guide this back into the lower receiver. Right now, mine is on safety, and I'm going to guide this in. It will not go all the way in, or even if it does, you're going to have to mess with it in a second. You're going to have to line up the trigger with the slot down here so that it goes through, and then push it down. See how my selector switch moved off of safe? What you're going to have to do now is take your flathead screwdriver and pry the body up from the shell and move your selector switch so that it matches with your gearbox. This is very trial and error. See how it's in safety, but yet I can still pull the trigger? It's actually in semi-auto right now. So this is very trial and error. You just kind of got to keep doing it until you get everything matched up correctly. See, safety is safety, semi-auto is semi-auto, full auto is full auto, and I can't move it past. Sometimes you'll be able to move it past safety, sometimes you won't. Usually you won't be able to, but it depends. Now that you have that side lined up, you're going to flip it over and line up the opposite side. I disabled ambidextrous controls on mine, so I will not be doing that, but if you were owning this gun, the exact same process, just on this side. Now that you're here, you're going to want to put in your both body pins. It is actually important that you put your body pins in before you screw on your motor grip, because sometimes your motor grip pulls the gearbox down slightly and your body pins won't line up properly. So just make sure these go in first. And it's only these back two. The front one is for securing the lower. This is for securing the lower to the upper, not for the gearbox. So once those are on, you're going to guide your wires through the two holes on your motor grip. Once they're through, it will slide right on, and you will screw your motor grip into the gearbox shell. Now, for my motor grip, one of the screws stayed in, so I'm going to screw that one on first, and then I will get the other one afterward. You want this to be as tight as it can be, because the motor grip, sometimes it can come loose, not just for the SCAR, for any AEG, and if it comes loose, it will gradually move not only down, but wobble side to side, which will mess with your motor height. And in some build and stock guns, that really won't affect much, but if you're into upgrading or you have a stressful setup in your gun, that motor height movement can actually be enough to throw off the shimming between your beveled pinion and will mess things up sound-wise in your gun. You're going to be really screechy. It won't be able to be centered. Gears will wear down faster. Your rate of fire will suffer. Torque will suffer actually a little bit too if you have a heavy spring in there. So it's just good. You want to make that as tight and stable as possible. Now on to the next part. This is what part that gets a lot of people mixed up sometimes, is that you wire your motor, your wires in your pistol grip. The black goes up one side of the pistol grip in the corner. You want to make sure you're pressing that against the side. Your red gets folded down across the pistol grip and then goes up the other side from the black. So I'm going to do this quickly and then show you what the end product should look like. So as you can see, the red gets folded across the bottom and then rides up side, and the black rides up the other side. Your motor will now be able to be dropped in to place. I have upgraded wire, so my wire is actually thicker than the wire in a stock D-Boy SCAR. In the stock D-Boy SCAR, you'll be able to move your motor around, and the spring will push it back up. Mine does not do that because the wires are thick enough where it actually sticks down there. Also, a note for my wires, I solder mine into place onto the tabs. So I have one normal, which is like, for this purpose of the video showing you, this is the normal motor connector. This goes on top of this tab over here, little thin tab. You press it right on top. And then this red one I soldered that's another option you can do. You can solder it. You solder to the other tab. So I will cut the video while I go solder the tab on, and I will come back to you. Alright, so once you reach the point where your motor is in, connected to your wires, and everything is secured in your lower receiver, you can tighten it back down. So what I tend to do is I like to loosen my motor adjustment screw a little bit when I put it back in, just because I can always adjust it again later, and I'd rather have it be too loose and move it in than be too tight. It's a personal preference, you don't have to do this, but every time I put your motor back in, it is a little different with your wiring. So I loosen it a turn or two, put it back in, screw everything down, and then when I go to retest it, that's when I will tighten it back up with the motor height. Sometimes I even change these screws around too, with how tight they are. It really, for stock guns, you should be fine with putting this on, screwing it back into place, and just testing your motor height once everything's put together. However, in my upgraded gun, this grip is a little tight in general, so my thicker wires make the motor height stick a little bit, and this is just how I do it. I specifically do that to this gun alone. I don't do this to the other guns that I work on, because it's just this grip and motor plate combo with my wires, and it's just one of those things when you're teching or opening things up and putting them back together where the slightest changes can make differences. Okay, so now that your motor's back in and your gearbox is all set up, you're going to put your lower receiver back into your upper receiver. So what you're going to do is grab your upper, pull the handle all the way back till you reveal part of the mock bolt. You're going to take this piece, dust cover, and there will be a little hole, a little ridge inside here, actually. See that black? It goes up right in that spot. It's a little higher than around it. There's also a ridge on this that goes up. So you're just going to place this inside the hole on the inside, and then let it rest there. You can check to see if it's in the right by pushing the handle forward. It should move with the handle. So that's how you know that's all set. Next, you're going to take your lower receiver. See how there's a ridge right here? You're going to line it up with the bottom of your upper receiver in the ridge and just slide it into place. You will need to push the... if I can get this on. You'll need to push this down, have it keep sliding, then sometimes push this up, the fake dust cover bolt again. Sorry, the dust cover for your mock bolt. Push it up against the top, and then slide this behind it. Then you're just going to jam this forward into your hop-up. Your hop-up has a spring on it, so it will stay against the air nozzle. And once this is forward, you are going to put in your body pin. Now your gun is back together minus the stock. So for your stock, simple part, you're going to get it. I always fold mine in half because it's easier to route the wires through that way. However, your wires are different than mine, so you might not have to do this step. But you have to line up the guide rod and the spring to the charging handle, and then route your wires through. Sorry about this awkward angle, because my wires are weird, so I have to approach it this way. You will most likely only have a Tamiya plug on yours if it's stock, so yours should be a little easier than this. But my wires like to give me a hard time. So I use pliers sometimes to just grab the plugs and pull them, twist and pull them through. Now once you're through the first part, put the stock on, fold your stock over again, feeding wires through. Now we take the 3 screws from the beginning and just put them back in the holes and tighten it up. This will be the final step in putting your gun back together. So once your screws are all in place for your stock, make sure they're tight. These do come loose after a while, just from normal use, so make sure that you're always retightening these. Then you will plug in your battery and test your gun out. Obviously, something doesn't work right. It can be a multitude of things. If it sounds weird, it's most likely motor height. Assuming you didn't touch shimming and it sounded better before you took it apart. If something is not working right when you put your gearbox back together in your gun, contact me or any tech on a local forum, Airsoft Mechanics, Airsoft Society, Airsoft Forum, YouTube. Look around, make a video, PM people, contact me, I'll be able to help you fix it. Most problems from doing this are fairly simple. The worst thing you can happen is parts not fitting or working together, and you don't know the actual reason why, so you assume they should be, and you try to jam them together or use them together when you shouldn't. And I'm struggling with the screws right now. I'm trying to hold it at an angle where you can see. Sorry about that. But basically, if you know things are having problems, don't try to force them to work. You're just going to break them further, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. Contact someone to help you out. Alright guys, so this will conclude putting the D-Boys SCAR back together. Again, this works for D-Boys, Echo 1, Classic Army Sport Line SCARs, because they're all modeled after the same thing. But there you go. That was the disassembly and reassembly of your SCAR L. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. Check out my channel. Talk to me on forums. I'm always open. And I will see you soon.